Hey everybody, this is Modern Refugee. Have my coffee with you guys here this morning. And still working on recovery. Had some residual problems. Had a couple appointments yesterday that I took care of. In the meantime, I've been doing stuff around the house here. Been picking up stuff and cleaning gear and putting it up, and got some scope caps that I installed, and got my GMRS license, so I'm going to go play around with that later. I figured that's probably the first step to getting into the amateur radio. I got several amateur radios here. I got shortwave radio. In fact, there's a big one sitting right above me right here. That's the one that I always use when I want to hear what's going on out in the wider world. I got some copper wire wrapped around the house, and that's what I plug into that I use for an antenna. But I had some people ask me questions in comments of previous videos how the old timers handled two different topics. And one was how they handled their money, and the other one was how they handled water. And I can understand, if you didn't grow up in a rural environment like I did, rural farming community, old school community, why you'd have questions like that, because, they're legitimate questions. And the first one is money. How do the old timers handle their money? And this is something, for the life of me, I don't think I've ever seen on any prepping channel ever discuss this. Yet all the old timers had this in their homes. And what that is a safe. I've never heard a prepping channel say, hey, you know what, maybe you should have a safe to put your valuables in your home, or at least a lockbox. But all the old timers, all the old farmhouses had a safe squirreled away somewhere. And they typically had it squirreled away in some place where it was harder to access, a back bedroom in a closet or something, or down a ridiculously steep flight of stairs down in a basement area or something like that. But all the old farmhouses had a safe. And, nowadays with modern technology, a fireproof and waterproof safe isn't that expensive. And it's something, like I said, I don't know why more prepping channels don't discuss that. But a lot of the places around here were older farms. So when the Depression hit, a lot of people had their stuff already paid for. So there wasn't that threat of foreclosure like they had out in, the Great Plains, and like in Nebraska and Kansas and stuff. You hear stories of, people losing their farms during the Depression. Most people had their stuff paid for around here, because this community, by the time the Depression had rolled around, had already been around 60, 70 years. That's kind of the thing with the further eastern states. But the old timers didn't look real kindly on banks. They didn't look real kindly on banks, and they didn't look real kindly on investments in general. I still remember my grandmother saying this, and I've said this in other videos. My grandmother always said the best investment you can have is a full pantry, and that's because she lived through that era. My grandmother was born in 1903, by the way, just so you guys, can kind of put that into context. So she was already in her 30s by the time the Depression rolled around. And but they kept their valuables in a safe at home. And another thing that you don't hear when people talk about the Depression and stuff like that, there were still people that had money, and then those people, they actually acted like a bank. So if people had money, they would loan money out to other people so they could, buy a farm, or, do some type of upgrade on their, personal investments. That kind of stuff was actually fairly common. And a lot of the more well-to-do people around here did exactly that. They borrowed money out. There's always risk with all of that, but they actually did that on a fairly regular basis, because, again, nobody trusted the banks. And, none of this is legal or financial advice for the modern day. That's how the old-timers handled stuff, and that is my recollections of how they took care of their money. And something that I do here is I keep a a bank bag around where I keep my important documents, as it were, and some cash and stuff in that portable type bag that I can, something happens that I would have to evacuate my home here, I can grab that and I can go, and that's got all kinds of neat stuff in it, like photocopies of IDs and all certified copies of important documents, things that people used to keep in safety deposit boxes back in the day, but people don't really keep safety deposit boxes anymore. Most of the banks and stuff around here, they don't even offer that service. I mean, I think the last bank that I can remember offering that service around here was probably sometime in the 1990s, at least here right locally that I can think of. There's no safety deposit boxes in any banks around here anymore. But that is some things on how the old timers dealt with money. The second one is water. And well, by the time I was growing up, electricity was around here, and most places had well pumps, electric well pumps, and they had regular dug wells. Even when I was a kid, in my teenage years and stuff, there were still a couple of farms around here that had electricity, but they didn't have running water inside the house, but they still had hand pumps. And if I had, a whole bunch of money drop in my lap and I was going to go start I was going to start from scratch, and I was going to build a house, and I was going to, have it preparedness related, that would be one of the first things that I would want done, is I would want a hand pump. Because no matter what, you can still get water. And I still remember these people going out and getting, pails of water and bringing them in the house for the day use of the water that they used. So hand pumps were a big thing, and they were redundant. And still, even when I was growing up, and this day and age even more so now, most of the farms and stuff around here, because they have cattle and they have different livestock and stuff that they got to take care of, they have generators for all their well pumps. And that's the main reason they've got generators. And another thing is a lot of places a lot of farms will have to have some type of generator if the power goes out for ventilation, because if there isn't ventilation, most animals have a higher body temperature than what human beings have. And you have all them animals packed into a small space, and it's hot outside, you don't have any ventilation in there, those animals will literally cook, and you lose all your investments. So, having a generator is kind of the modern way, a way the old timers took care of stuff. But then there was, the way the modern people took care of stuff, like the way the old timers did. And there's another thing that I don't hear a lot of people talk about that the old farmhouses have, and that is a cistern. A lot of old farmhouses had a cistern. I'm going to say probably 80% of the ones that I was in when I was a kid, although some of them weren't in use anymore. But, a lot of these places were built pre-1900s, so a cistern was an important way to store water. And what a cistern typically was it was some type of tank that was down in the basement of the old farmhouses that collected the rainwater off the roof, and then that was funneled in there. And typically it was a cement box that was in one corner or another of the farmhouses. And, nowadays you go in them old farmhouses, them cisterns have been taken out, but you can still see the frame on the floor in the corner. You'll see like a square where something was chiseled out or broke out of the cement floor. That's where the cistern used to be. And, they would use that water for, different things. But they collected that water and they saved that. So, the whole rain catchment thing that people talk about now in the modern sense, the old timers did that over 100 years ago already. And another thing they would do, and I remember this especially in the old farmhouses, one farm in particular that I can remember, they carried in their water for the day. One pail of water went into the back of the wood cook stove because that had a holding tank on it, and that kept hot water available for cleaning or cooking or whatever that they needed throughout the day. So, they would go out in the morning, they would pump their pails full of the first chore they would do. It didn't matter what the weather was. They would go out and they would pump the water into the pails, and they would carry that in the house, and they would have different places where they would set those pails. You know, some of them would even transfer them into large crocks or whatnot, but typically they just used pails because they used the water every day, and the next day they went out and filled the pail back up again. And they would fill the tank on the back of the cook stove, so they had hot water to use for whatever that they needed, and they would refill that throughout the day. But that was basically how the old timers handled water. And as you can see here, kind of how I'm bringing these stories up, some of the stuff what we think now as modern cutting edge prepping, you know, like having ways to collect water and ways to secure valuables and that kind of stuff, that modern, you know, cutting edge stuff, really the old timers were doing it over 100 years ago. But anyways, I want to take some time to talk to you guys here today and discuss these couple of topics that came up in my comments. But anyway, this is Modern Refugee. Appreciate all my subscribers out there. Hope you guys always get something out of my videos, and you guys take care.